Hear, hear.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you. It is an honour, and it has been a real privilege to speak on childcare in this country, and to be the critic for families, children, and social development is obviously a great honour to rise and represent my riding of Peterborough-Kawartha. Tonight we are in what's called the third reading of Bill C-35. So for people at home, that means after this reading we will vote on it, and then we will see what happens. So there's been a lot of study, there's been a lot of debate on this bill, and there's been a lot of opportunity to meet with stakeholders, operators, listen to parents, and also colleagues across the way in committee. The reality is, Madam Speaker, this Liberal government loves to promise the moon and the stars and not deliver. And so I think it's not very surprising that this universal childcare bill is any different. It is not universal. As critic to this file, I'm here to elevate the alarm bells of parents and operators who are being silenced about the shortcomings of this bill. Madam Speaker, do you know the ratio of private versus publicly funded childcare in Newfoundland? 70%. 70% of Newfoundland relies on the private sector. So why would the Liberals purposely leave them out of Bill C-35? Now, here is the exact language of the bill. Under Guiding Principles 7A, it says, support the provision of and facilitate equitable access to high-quality early learning and childcare programs and services, in particular those that are provided by public and not-for-profit childcare providers. So we, the Conservatives, put forth an amendment in committee, and the amendment read as follows. To facilitate access to all types of early learning and childcare programs and services regardless of the provider, such as those that are provided through traditional daycare centres, centres with extended, part-time or overnight care, nurseries, flexible and drop-in care, before and after school care, preschools and co-op childcare, faith-based care, unique programming to support children with disabilities, home-based childcare, nannies and shared nannies, au pairs, stay-at-home parents or guardians who raise their own children, or family members, friends or neighbours who provide care that meet or exceed standards set by provincial governments or Indigenous governing bodies and respond to the varying needs of children and families while respecting the jurisdiction and unique needs of the provinces and Indigenous peoples. That's a pretty well-rounded amendment, Madam Speaker, and it really speaks to what Conservatives have been saying from the beginning: choice and flexibility and including everyone. And the Liberals and NDP voted no. Why did they vote no to that amendment? And this is where the politics really comes into play, and ideology, because they have an agenda and it doesn't include everyone. They really believe in public and not-for-profit. They really believe that they can decide what is best for your children. And that is just opposite to what Conservatives believe. They think they know what is best for your children. But in reality, this bill actually excludes 50% of children. 50% of children in Canada are living in a childcare desert. You see, the Liberals are quite talented, actually, at marketing slogans. And what sounds better than a $10 a day daycare? It sounds wonderful. The out-of-control cost of living created by these Liberals with their inflationary spending has made life unbearable for most Canadians. But what they love to do is come in from the side, bring a distraction, and say, don't look at that. We're going to make life more affordable for you. Here's $10 a day childcare. They give you faulty solutions to the big problems that they've created. So I think it's really important to break it down in this $10 a day daycare plan. Let's break down the fine print and the very important details that they have conveniently forgot to mention. They will tell you we are negative. We would like to tell you that we elevate the voices of the people who speak to us, because that is what we were elected to do. This marketing campaign instantly and drastically increased demand. Of course it would. As a mom, affordable childcare is critical. But if you can't access it, it doesn't exist. But the reality is there is no systems and infrastructure in place to meet the demand. And you know who suffers? The child, the parents. The quality of childcare is being compromised because of this poorly thought out and poorly executed bill. One operator told me that Bill C-35 is like putting a Band-Aid on a sinking ship. Madam Speaker, how many people are familiar with budget airline service? This is the concept where the customer pays a lower fee but is nickel and dime for all the basics. For example, you pay $200 for a flight, but then you have to pay maybe $50 for a seat, another $50 for your luggage, more money for food, and so on and so on. You get the idea, but by the time you are said and done, there really isn't a deal because the money has to come from somewhere. That is what is happening with this child care bill. Centres are being forced to charge parents extra fees to cover food, admin costs, and more. One operator told me they are 15 months into their provincial agreement and there is no light at the end of the tunnel, meaning they don't know how they're going to manage the extra costs. I think Erin Cullen, who's an engineer with a beautiful new daughter who lives in Newfoundland and Labrador who cannot access childcare, really summarized it best when she compared this Liberal childcare program to the government telling Canadians they're getting free groceries. Everybody's getting free groceries. You get free groceries and you get free groceries. But the problem is when you get to the grocery store shelves, there's no food on the shelf. I think the worst part about this bill and story the Liberals want to sell is that it promotes gender equity. How is not having a choice equity? Erin is one of many examples there is no choice for her. There's no choice because she, like many healthcare workers, shift workers, and many workers can't go to work because there are no childcare spaces available. Erin has said they have to leave the province. They have to leave her home. How is that equity? Jennifer Radcliffe is a director of Pebble Lane Early Learning, and she testified at HUMA Committee while we studied this bill. And I want to read into the record what she said, because I think it's really important. Here's what she said. Currently, the CWELC, so for those watching, that's Canada-wide Early Learning Childcare, but we say CWELC, excludes disbursement funding that is used to hire support staff. Without this funding available, we have to turn away children who require additional support in our programs. Madam Speaker, so many children require additional support right now. They are still reeling from COVID. There are so many special needs kids out there. She went on to say this must also change so that we can meet the needs of all children. The pressure to implement this program so quickly has resulted in overpayments to providers, families double-dipping, and funding methods being overlapped. Parents are stressed, and providers feel like they have no help. It is clear that the provinces are scrambling as they try to prove that they can do this, but they are ultimately failing. You cannot simply throw money at a problem and expect it to change. Waitlists across the country are growing by the thousands each month, and families are left with no one to help them. Parents need to work, and if they don't have care, their only option is social assistance. This doesn't seem right. Affordable childcare is an empty promise to parents if it is not accessible. Providers are doing everything they can to accept as many families as possible, but there are simply not enough spaces. Demand is increasing at a level that we have not seen in years. New spaces must be created in order to meet demand. Private operators need to be able to expand, but are being excluded from funding for new spaces means they cannot afford to. The fee caps mean we are restricted when negotiating leases and working out operating expenses. This next woman who testified, I really want the NDP to listen to this, because this is what the NDP fight for, quite frankly, and I think it's important. Maggie Moser is the director, Board of Directors, Ontario Association of Independent Childcare Centres, and she said, the CWELC program has not delivered good value for taxpayers and does not meet Canadian standards of equity. The implementation provides undue benefits to higher income families who are sailing their yachts on the tides of the program, while those who need it most are left drowning. Lower income families were excluded from obtaining access to the CWELC childcare spots. Families who could already afford these fees of the centre were the ones who benefited from the rebates and discounts, while the rest were left behind on a long wait list. That's the reality of this bill, Madam Speaker, because if you already have a spot, you're going to take it up. And then you have people who need maybe part-time spot, but they can't access it because people are holding it because they're so scarce. And it is the people who are lowest income, the most vulnerable, that are most negatively impacted by this. I asked Maggie about her current wait list, how many childcare centres she oversees and how many spaces there are. And Maggie said we have 147 spaces as well as 24 half-time spaces going all the way from infant up to kindergarten. Our centre is 100% full. There is not one empty space in our centre. And at the moment we have around 600 names on our wait lists. They are for spots in the next year and a half. You know, That's the sad part. By the time some of these people who are able to access the spot, their child has aged out of it. You have people who are thinking about having kids and they're putting their name on a wait list. I want to acknowledge to the minister, and I want to acknowledge to everybody that, yes, for people who were lucky enough to get a spot, this is helping them. I will not dismiss that at all. But it's like winning the lottery, Madam Speaker. This plan is saving them money if they're lucky enough to win the child care lottery, because that's what this is. But the money is also being taken in other spaces: food, gas, mortgages. And I just think it's really important that we recognize where all of the gaps are. And it's all of the women who have messaged me who can't choose to go back to work. This is a problem. Catherine Babowell, who operates Les Petits Soleils, submitted a written submission to the HUMA Committee, and I want to read it into the record. From what I can see happening today as a result of the CWELC program and what will inevitably continue to happen through Bill C-35, many private childcare centres will not survive this transition, and the investments made by private tax-paying citizens will be instead replaced by not-for-profit and childcare centres that will be funded through the hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money in subsidies and supports. There are private childcare operators ready and willing to make the investments in their communities to create childcare spaces with no cost to taxpayers, but they are unable to access a free market, and thus the families that choose these private centres are unable to receive the affordability support of the CWELC program. There are also substantial administrative costs being incurred by taxpayers to offer incentive grants to not-for-profits and to staff government positions to manage the use of funds, claims, and audits. As a Canadian, as a tax-paying citizen, and as a childcare entrepreneur who has invested thousands of dollars and hours into building the best childcare program I possibly could to support the parents and children in the community, I find this extremely disheartening. Her voice matters too, Madam Speaker. This email is pretty powerful. This is from Rebecca. My name is Rebecca, and I am a lawyer practicing in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. I have an 11-month-old, and I am currently on leave from my position. The federal government brought in a subsidy so that parents could have $10 a day daycare. Daycares collect $10 a day from parents and collect the rest from the federal government. However, the federal government only pays on a quarterly basis and is often late. And as such, daycares end up operating at a loss with the minimal cash flow, and many have had to shut down as a result. The intention of the $10 a day daycare, this is so important. The intention of the $10 a day daycare was to allow women to access affordable childcare, but it has had the very absurd result that women are being forced out of the workforce entirely with no income at all because they made the choice to have a child. Many of these people, when they phone me, say, Michelle, I'm a Liberal, I'm an NDP. When we talk about partisanship, this is the child should be at the crux of this discussion. But it's not, because it's political. Because this is part of the supply agreement that the Liberals and NDP signed together, and they check it off. And when you look at the political implications of this, where the childcare deserts are the highest, Saskatchewan with 92%, how many Liberal seats are in that province? 0. And they know that. They know that, Madam Speaker, so they've created a bill to try to divide us and unfortunately put women against each other, which I'm not buying into. I'm here to elevate the voices of parents and operators. It's urban versus rural. Right? That's what this bill has done. It's left more people out. The reality is so many people in rural ridings can't access a centre. It's not how it works. You have to rely on your friends, family, neighbours, grandma, and it's not in this bill. And if they really cared, they would have added that amendment. If they really, really cared, they would have said, you know what? Yeah, we will put that amendment in. But this is a political game. Because they're failing as a government in all areas. Housing, cost of living, and this is a distraction. We're giving you $10 a day daycare. And this place is so upsetting, you know, it's upsetting because you think people come here to make a difference, to listen. and you get sucked into these political games. And I really think everyone in here came with the intention to help people. I believe that. That's why, you know, it's the biggest question you get asked. But this is the reality of what we're dealing with. When the Conservatives asked the Liberal government how they could back up their claims that Ontario has 92% of licensed childcare providers sign on to the CWELC program, and almost all of them have had reduced fees by 50%, the response from the government, this was an order paper question, so it was written, says, the specific implementation of these early learning childcare agreements falls within the legislative authorities of the provinces and territories in accordance with their own unique ELCC, early learning childcare systems. Madam Speaker, this is the proof that I'm talking about. The Liberals are setting it up so that when this fails, it's on the province's backs. They're going to be the fall guys for all of these shortcomings that everyone is ringing alarm bells about. It's not just Conservatives. Just Google it. Just Google childcare. Every single day there's an article about this. Every day. And the minister will say, well, the Conservatives say, you know, don't do nothing. That's not what we're saying. We're asking you to include everybody. We're asking you to offer choice. How long do I have? 3 minutes. Thank you. And I think that's what we're saying here. And, you know, there's a lot I would turn and ask for this collaboration on this. Conservatives put forth concrete amendments to the bill for the National Advisory Council to track data on the implementation of the childcare program, including the availability of childcare services, the number of families on waitlists for childcare places, and any progress made in reducing the number of families on waitlists. Accountability, tracking. How do you measure success if you're not tracking it? Do you know what this amendment was? Voted down. It was voted down. How are you going to track success if you're not measuring it? I want to read this into the record because I think it's pretty powerful. This is from Christine Passmore, and she wrote, I had a family share with me that they had to send their children back to a third world country to live with their grandparents as they could not find any childcare option in Grand Prairie. Families are being discouraged from moving here on Facebook because the lack of childcare in the area, as well families are moving out of Alberta. We also had 2 YMCA after-school care locations announce that they will be closing permanently as of July 1st, 2023, as they are unable to staff them. This will be a loss of 127 out of school care spaces here. Parents are not enrolling their children into the education system for kindergarten because of the lack of childcare options. Instead, they are leaving them in daycare full-time. This is the first time in 17 years I have been in childcare that I'm seeing this happen. I want to read another letter that I think is really important because we do talk about moms a lot, but you know, I had this one dad write into me, so I want to give a shout out to the dad, Kurt, and he said, I'm writing in reference to the Post. I don't usually speak up, but affordable childcare does not exist for most. I'm a father of 2 children, ages 6 and 8, and unfortunately they have been in daycare since they were babies because both my wife and I have full-time jobs. We've been very fortunate to always be able to find work, and until a few years ago have not struggled financially. Because of our jobs, we have to have them in after-school program. Now with the new rules for affordable childcare, in order to recover costs for younger children, because the real cost of care doesn't go down simple because someone wants to. The fees for school-age children is going up. To add to the frustration, the amount of tax credits for childcare for school-age children is also decreasing. It is getting to the point, like many other families, where the cost of childcare is so great, one of us is going to have to quit our jobs. There are no questions here, and I know that that is the reality and nothing that you can do. I just want to make sure you are aware of these unfortunate facts, like all the other things that the current government is doing, which seems designed to break this once great country. Thank you, Kurt. Wow. The reality is, Madam Speaker, we will honor the agreements that are signed by the provinces and territories. But I want it loud and clear and into the record where all of the gaps are. Conservatives will continue to fight for choice and freedom. We believe that parents are the best people to make the right choices for their children. And we believe that there should be access to all forms of childcare. We believe in freedom, choice, flexibility, and we will fight to remove the ideological shackles from this bill.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'll thank my colleague for that speech, although there was a lot in it that she said that was simply untrue. You know, when they talk about fighting for choice, there's nothing in this legislation that prevents parental choice from what kind of childcare they choose to pursue. That is very much a conservative ideological point. And there's nothing in this bill that divides Canadians. I really don't understand where the Conservatives are coming from in saying that childcare is a divisive issue. In fact, when you talk to Canadians and hear from them, they're exuberant about this, and it's cross-generational, Madam Speaker. It's not just folks who have little kids right now. It's, in fact, all generations. But, Madam Speaker, my question is, after such a down and negative speech, why are the Conservatives voting for C-35 if they're so against it? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Or for Peterborough-Cowart.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I really think it's important to say this isn't down and negative, it's reality. There's a very big difference.
Very well said.
There's a very big difference between telling everybody that everything's great and reality.
Putting lipstick on a pig.
And 50% of kids are left out. So why would we vote in favor of this? Because the toothpaste is out of the tube, and we don't want to punish the families that have benefited from this. But what we want to do is, when we are in government, and we will be, we will fix this. Because right now, there is no flexibility, there is no choice, and there is ideological shackles on both the provinces and parents.
Questions et commentaires? Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Nanaimo-Ladysmith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member from Peterborough. Kawartha? Thank you. I'm trying to get that one down. I appreciate the member's work around childcare. I do think that there's a lot to be said for parents collaborating together to implement real solutions for families and children. One area that the member highlighted quite frequently throughout her speech, and similar to the question I asked the minister, was around the gaps in people who are getting paid appropriately to work in the field. This is an ongoing issue in provinces and territories across Canada, where in order to offer the spaces, we need the trained, qualified people in these positions. And if the member can share with us today her thoughts on what steps need to be taken to ensure that the people are in the positions that we need.
Honourable Member for Peterborough-Cowart.
Thank you to the colleague for her question. It's a great question. I mean, there's no national labour strategy, right? And we've seen it. We saw it in the order paper question. Yep, this is what we're doing, but we're not going to track it. We're not going to measure it. We're not going to include the labour of minister. And I think that's the reality of what we've been pushing for. And so that's what I would say. I would say it's not being addressed. And you're not going to just pull people from the sky for these positions. In fact, they're mass exodusing from these positions. Early childhood educators are incredible humans, just as are all the people who care for our children in safe environments. But there's no national labour strategy, which we put forth as an amendment, and they voted it down. And in fact, unfortunately, to my colleague from the NDP, so did the NDP.
Wow.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The Honourable Member for Battle Forest Lloydminster.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. We, as Conservatives, we did move an amendment at committee, and I just want to read what that said. It was to amend the function of the National Advisory Council on Early Learning and Childcare, so which includes supporting the recruitment and the retention of a well-qualified workforce, conduct regular engagement, and a specific mandate to call out to maintaining and understanding the available childcare spaces, the numbers on wait lists, and the progress made to reduce wait lists for families. So I'm just wondering if my colleague here could elaborate on why the NDP and the Liberals voted against having this workforce type of strategy, also to an accountability with the government, the federal government, and the council, so that people were actually identifying the gaps, making plans to fill those gaps, so that we actually have an adequate workforce for our childcare.
Honourable Member for Peterborough-Cowart.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my colleague. She's a fierce advocate and a mom who's had, I think, 2 kids during Parliament. And she's just she's a wealth of knowledge and also lives in a childcare desert of Saskatchewan and knows wholeheartedly the real struggle of this. She sat on the HUMA committee with me. Listen, I'd love to tell you something great. I'd love to look into the camera and tell everybody at home that there's some great reason why they would do that. At the end of the day, it's because Conservatives put it forward. And they've created some narrative that Conservatives hate childcare. That's what they love to tell people. But the reality is most of us, women on this side, we're moms too. And we're not pitted against other women in this House. We are supporting everyone. We support women who breastfed for the first time, the minister opposite. Good for you. We support women, men of the NDP who bring their babies in here. We support everybody. And that is what we're trying to say over and over and over again. And that's why we're trying to elevate the voices of all the people who are ringing these alarm bells. So why did they vote it down? You'd have to ask them.
The honourable member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I listened intently to the honourable member's speech, and as a father and my wife and I have 3 daughters, and one of our daughters is in daycare. We have seen the reduction in daycare fees in the province of Ontario, and it's also great to see the provincial minister responsible for this area go out on literally a weekly basis and celebrate this childcare agreement that has been put in place in Ontario, the one that's been called for literally 3 or 4 decades, that's helping parents in every riding, in every city in the province of Ontario save literally thousands and thousands of after-tax dollars. That's helping women re-enter the labor force, increasing women's participation rate. So, Madam Speaker, I was wondering, can we not acknowledge the major benefits that are happening under this child care agreement that we've signed with all provinces and territories from coast to coast to coast?
Here, here.
Peterborough-Kawartha.
Absolutely, Madam Speaker, and to the member opposite, I was very clear of that in my speech. And I'll say it over and over again. There's lots of people who have benefited. There's tons of people. But, you already have news articles coming up. Should Alberta reconsider its child care funding agreement? Most of these provinces were given no other options. They were bullied into this. If you don't sign here, you're not going to get any money. So on the record, again, for the 100th time, I will say on record, wait and see, because we are the only party. Yes, there are tons of people benefiting from this, but there's just as many not. And so how is that inclusive? It's not. So until it's fixed, no, we're not going to just say it's wonderful, it's great, because it's not.
Then comments, questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Battleford Lloydminster.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It's a pleasure to get up twice here. I really appreciate that. I want to follow up again regarding the labour discussion that we were having. Conservatives again moved an amendment at committee regarding the reporting clause of the bill to include the Minister of Labour in the annual reporting. And the annual reporting must include a national labour strategy to recruit and retain a qualified early childhood education workforce. So this was voted down by the NDP and the Liberal and the Bloc, and I just don't understand why, especially when the NDP keep getting up and saying, we need a workforce strategy, we need a labour strategy. I'm just wondering if my colleague can maybe elaborate why they voted against having this put in the bill and an accountability measure to make sure that there is an accountability measure when it comes to the labour workforce.
Well, Parliament, the honourable member for Kawartha.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you to my colleague. Listen, accountability and the Liberals, those 2 words don't go in the same sentence. And the reason I say that today, in particular, it's extra deflating today. We have a Minister of Public Safety who knew for 3 months that the worst criminal in Canadian history was going to be moved from maximum to medium security. He didn't tell the victims' families. There's no accountability. And this is just a pattern of behavior. And I wish it wasn't true, but the longer I'm here, the more I see it. There's a pattern of behavior. There's no accountability because they're immune. Because their prime minister doesn't do anything. And so that's the reality of what you're dealing with. So why would they sign on to an amendment that puts in accountability? They don't want that, because then they'd have to do something.